no freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be buried in my grave. Go home to my Lord and be free.
In the late 1870s, Exodusters, often former enslaved people, many who later became poor black farmers from the South, were drawn to Kansas in part by its free state reputation. Many had heard it was home of fiery abolitionist John Brown, who was hanged in 1859 for treason after failing to foment a slave rebellion at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. The state was also home to the 1st Kansas Colored Infantry, the first regiment of African Americans raised in a northern state and the first black unit to see combat in the Civil War. In flyers, the leader of the Exoduster movement, Benjamin Singleton, better known as Old Pap, promoted Kansas as a promised land. "Ho for Kansas," the most popular flyer read. Nearly 30 black families claimed land in Stafford County. By the 1900s, it is estimated that there were as many as 400 African Americans living in Stafford County. The county's population then was about 9,000 residents. By 2021, there were no remaining Exoduster families in Stafford County, where the population has dwindled to 4,000 people and is 94% white. Fewer than 30 African Americans live there now, according to the 2020 census. In 2021, several of those descendants were invited back to Stafford County to see the land that their families once claimed and called home. In October 2022, some of those descendants returned again to Stafford County to participate in St. John's first homecoming festival. We asked them to reflect on their families and experiences surrounding their visit.
My name is Renee Elmore. I'm here because I have found that my ancestor, my third great-grandfather, Reverend John Arthur Scott and Julia Bass Scott, were Exodusters from Louisiana, Jackson Parish, Louisiana, and their final homestead was in St. John, Kansas, Ohio Township.
Hi, my name is Lamont Bowen, and I'm from Wichita, Kansas. And basically, I'm here to learn. It's a learning process for me because I don't know that much about the history of the Bowen family. However, I have discovered that there's a black cemetery here that the Bowens are buried in off of Highway 50. So to me, that was surprising and interesting because I had no idea. Now, my father was born here, but he was raised in Garden City. So that's the only connection that thus far. Well, that's the only thing that I knew about St. John. But other than that, I'm still learning.
Okay. Hi, I'm Shelby Renee. Some people like to call me Little Renee. If you can't tell, I'm the daughter of Renee. I'm here as a storyteller. My mom has gone on this incredible journey of finding our family, and as an artist, I'm here to fill in the missing pieces and to see how can I use my own story to inspire other people, other Black Americans that are descendants of enslaved Africans, to look into their history and learn the legacy that their ancestors left.
Family history says Jonathan Arthur Scott was among the African Americans who served in the Louisiana State Legislature during Reconstruction. He gave a fiery speech to the legislature which enraged the local Ku Klux Klan. Reverend Scott had to flee Louisiana with his family, all but one grown daughter, and ended up homesteading in Stafford County, Kansas. Jonathan was a farmer as well as a minister. All told, between 15,000 and 20,000 Exodusters, like Reverend Scott and his wife, flocked to Kansas, urged on in part by St. John's namesake, John P. St. John, Kansas's 8th governor. Originally called Zion Valley, the community of St. John was renamed to gain favor with the governor and to sway his decision in naming it the county seat over neighboring Stafford. It apparently worked. St. John remains the county seat and Stafford County's largest town. John P. St. John also founded a relief organization that provided aid to migrants and was the group's board chairman before serving as the state's chief executive from 1879 to 1883. St. John supported 2 African American churches, a Baptist church, and the African Methodist Episcopal. But life was never easy. There was drought, endless Kansas winds, sun, dust, and secret organizations such as the Ku Klux Klan. The black homesteaders persevered as long as they could. Of those who survived the perils of racism and nature, most moved on. More than a century later, when it comes to talking with African Americans researching their family histories, most have been told the same story. The information is lost. But DNA research and the internet is rapidly changing that story.
But I think when it comes to the black community not being able to trace back their ancestors, I think there's shame. I think there's embarrassment. And it's just grief that this is for so many generations not to be able to trace back their tree, to not be able to see the land. I think that's the emotions that come out, but because anger is the first word we go to, because we've learned as kids, that's the only word that is most appropriate at that time. The second thing, what do I want from St. John? I'm very young in my life, and I don't want to think about it, but eventually I might have kids or get into a relationship, which seems a joke. But, when that eventually happens, I want to have roots here. I want to be able to show my kids that at 23 years old, I'm in a museum. I'm in a magazine. I want to be able to tell so many more stories about the people that we've met, the natives, and get them engaged. That's what I really want, because it's important, just as humans, to have a place where we feel like we belong. And I want to feel belong.
Yeah, so the story starts that my favorite uncle, who lives in Tyler, Texas, my daughter and I were visiting, as we often did a couple of years ago. And as we were leaving to return back home, my Uncle George turned to me and he said he wished he knew where his family was. And any other day I probably wouldn't have noticed it, but it was the look on his face of, I guess, a cross between wonderment and melancholy. Mm-hmm. So after discussing how he was feeling and the look on his face with my daughter and a cousin, we decided to embark on a journey of asking our relatives to take DNA tests. And about maybe 8 weeks after that, we got our results, and all these lists of names. Some names were familiar, some names weren't, but I remembered that I also had a document that my Uncle George gave me right before he left. Some names were misspelled, or maybe their spelling of it, or they didn't know what the right spelling was. And some birthdays, some correct, some a little challenging to read. Mm-hmm. And we started off with about 20 to 30 names that we knew of that were in Jackson Parish, Louisiana. And some he knew had escaped Louisiana due to discrimination and the KKK looking and hunting for them. And he said that they did go north to Kansas. He knew that much. Yeah, so in total, we've been looking on both sides of our family, which we have Elmores and other relatives on both sides. Just that's how it was in the South. So altogether, it's close to 5,000, but just from John's direct descendants and Julia's descendants, probably around 3,000. So searching and discovering on Ancestry Find a Grave and about 10 other sites that I decided to join, newspaper.com, 23andMe, a couple of Facebook pages, and probably some other publications. I noticed that the area in Kansas was Ohio, which I didn't know was Ohio Township. I thought it was Ohio, Kansas. And I did know that Ohio was a state as well. And then I noticed John, Kansas. I didn't know it was St. John, Kansas. And that was one of the places, or the final place that he ended up homesteading. We are familiar with him also being in Salina, as well as Nicodemus for a short time as well. I would say that it was surprising to learn that he was a politician, and he represented the same parish that my father, my uncle, and their siblings were born in. It's no surprise that my family, they're very good speakers and sharing their opinion. And they know how to get the attention of people and rally a crowd. My Uncle George, as I mentioned before, he is very heavily involved in politics, organizations like A. Philip Randolph. He was also involved in the union for many years at his various places of work. And just to look at the leadership role that he takes in our family, as well as in the community. Yeah. He's known as a Good Samaritan in Tyler, Texas, where
also
just
a vet. In,
oh yes,
Vietnam.
And of course, definitely. I'm sorry, a Vietnam vet. He is known as such a giver and such a leader in the community, and of course, that's what pastors are known for. We look to our pastors for direction on leading us into a better spiritual life, but possibly to make our lives better in the present.
Yes.
So I am not surprised that we come from a line of people in politics and also in ministry. Leaving the South at that time was, I'm sure, very scary and full of worry, but when you are looking to improve the lives of your children, there's something about making it better for the people behind you that shows that fear will be in little comparison to what the dream could ultimately be. And I often sit and wonder, as I'm talking to my uncle and my aunts as a whole, did John and Julia ever think that there would be so many people to come after them, and also two genealogy geeks in the family that would follow their footprint, that look for the words that they said, that would seek to make them whole, and to celebrate them as Exodusters, to find people like Becky and Alice who have helped to celebrate their legacy. I wonder if they ever thought that would ever happen while they were making courageous strides to give their children a better life.
Yeah, well, this St. John's is kind of hidden, to some degree. I think they came here, for one, as Renee was saying, cousin Renee, is because life was challenging where they were at. Number one, racism was rampant. The Klan and other groups didn't make life easy. And so I think they were looking for a future for themselves and mainly their kids. And then I think, they heard that there was land in Kansas that they could homestead, and then it becomes theirs, And so I think as a result, I think the decision was easy for them. And as a result, I think that's why they moved here. It was out of the way. It was not a metropolis, and and so I think that helped them in their decision to come here and stay here. For me, it's just theory.
Yeah.
I think there was racism here too. I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know.
Shocker.
Yeah.
And so I think that would, because they were familiar with that already when they left the South and they got here, and it may have been a bit better here, but they were still dealing with it. And another part of the reason is maybe, I don't know how the dynamics worked out in terms of how much land they own and stuff like that. And that makes a difference, because if you've got land, you know, you've got money.
Absolutely.
And so, and it could be that they didn't have enough, you know, they couldn't get maybe jobs, and like I said, this is just theory. Maybe they couldn't get jobs to support what they were trying to do, you know, to support their kids, or whatever the case might be. Now, some stayed and became farmers and landowners. And so that is kind of what I'm still, you know, researching. So I don't have a complete answer for you on that.
When my mother and I first came here, and Alice took us to our ancestors' land, we were able to get a piece of a brick, which we think is a fireplace, to where John lived. There's, you know, with how the country has been changing and capitalism and how it's been, you know, the constant changes throughout the country and throughout the decades, the country doesn't look like this. It doesn't look like you're traveling back in time. And there's a lot of diversity. You know, there's many different languages that people may speak in one city. I'm specifically thinking of Florida for me. You know, when I went to high school, I met so many different people from the Caribbean, from, you know, the Pacific Northwest. So the country doesn't look like this, right? And so I think it would be really important for the natives to understand that it wasn't that we never existed, it was because we were hidden. All of the minorities were on the south edge of the county and of the town. So I think kind of celebrating the fact that history is being taught correctly, that we're opening a conversation for us to understand more about how our ancestors lived and how we coexisted. So I see more of it as a celebration, because we're lucky to be in this town and to receive the correct history, because it's not like that everywhere else.
I think painful. I think education is painful. You know, because I mean, there may be people here that may not admit it, but there may be people here that's got more than a one drop, you know, in terms of their ethnicity.
Right.
And like I said, they may not admit it. They may be ashamed of it, you know, whatever the case might be. But you know, education is painful, and change is painful. And so, you know, with the people, with them seeing the influx of minorities coming here to celebrate their ethnicity and their lineage and their heritage and the Exodusters, I'm sure that probably shakes some people's tree. They probably don't like it, you know. But change is necessary.
My hope is that the natives of St. John, the descendants of the settlers, they will consider the word acceptance. Accepting what our history was, accepting that the stories, no matter how painful, no matter how guilt-ridden someone may feel, that there is pain in the truth, but there's also healing in the truth.
Absolutely.
And we're here to discover ourselves past our parents, to learn stories and learn information that was unfortunately stolen from us, separated from us, to become whole. And in that same conversation, we're also interested in you. We want to know about your history and what it feels like to be 5th and 6th generation farmers. We want to know about knowing who your 14th great-grandfather is. That's something that we may never know. We want to hear how it feels to know that you grew up in a town where Black people were here and you never saw them. We want to hear how shocking that is. We want to hear what it feels like to meet the descendants of people who taught you how to farm, how our ancestors helped you to build this land, and no matter how they were treated, it's still a part of our story, and it's a part of yours too. So with acceptance plus compassion for the human experience past the color line, no matter what that color may be.
Yeah, I have to add on to that because when we first came to St. John last year, we went into Tiger Pizza and Alice pointed out Bob. And apparently Bob had seen Elsie Scott, which is my third great aunt. And she died in 81, I want to say. 1981 she died, like, and so it was just so exhilarating to see someone who had some kind of memory and story. And so like my mother was saying, and like my cousin Lamont was saying, like, we're here to acknowledge history. We cannot change the past. We're not trying to. We want to acknowledge the history, but celebrate how, you know, we're fortunate to have ancestors that didn't have a tragic ending to their life.
So, should people feel angry, guilty?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. No one, we cannot blame anyone who is living for any of the mistakes of our forefathers. We can't. It was a different time. We can speculate, we can spend all this time, but it would just be wasting time for us uniting together. There's strength in us being together. And I was telling some of my friends about, you know, my experience, and with me being 23, my other Black friends were like, what a privilege. And I was taken aback when I heard that, because the context right now, how we throw around privilege, it's always tied to race. But the privilege of knowing my family, being able to stand on the very ground that they walked on, that they lived on, where John preached, there's such a pride that I have to my legacy, and knowing what I should be doing. And so I see more of it as an opportunity for us to show the entire country it is possible to have difficult conversations and to not get upset about it, because it has nothing to do with us. We're just here to learn the information and see how we can create and build from here.
To piggyback off of what Shelby said about guilt, I believe anytime that you hear anything about what a family member did or said, there is a human experience that happens within you to protect your family. Anybody would do that. However, when you learn the truth and learn that it was true, the acceptance of it, I absolutely understand that may be difficult to swallow.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
At the same time, I know personally I do not want to be blamed for some of the things that I'm aware of that my foreparents may have done that have nothing to do with, you know, the condition of the United States. And it doesn't necessarily have to do with race. It could be something in the family. I think just about everybody could think of that one person in their family that they learn about and they're like, oh my gosh, that happened. So I understand that. However, the compassion piece, to learn that at the end of the day, we're basically the same underneath. Our stories are more similar than they are different. What's different is the history, but our stories are more similar than we think, and we have more in common than what we think. What do I want? What a loaded question, right? But from St. John, what I would like is to continue a conversation. I want to continue to get to know the people of St. John. I want to continue to go to Tiger Pizza and meet Rusty. I want to continue to go in the middle of the square and talk to Randy. I'd like to continue to meet Anne from the library, who I met last year, and we hugged each other as if we'd been knowing each other for 20 years. I want to continue supporting the work of yourself, creating compelling stories and articles to create awareness. I want to continue to support Alice and help others understand what her cause is and why it's so passionate, and where that comes from, whether it be the innate in behavior that's instilled from just her being born Alice McMillan Lockridge, or if it's the values that her mother, Madeline, taught her before she left this earth. I want to continue to have a meeting place to meet my cousins, no matter how close, no matter how distant. Yesterday we got a chance to meet cousins that we know for sure we share the same DNA for the first time in St. John. I want to also thank you. No matter if you're in agreement, if you have questions, if you're at a crossroad, if you're not sure, if you're disturbed because of what your grandparents may be thinking about what happened this weekend and what happened last year, I want to thank you for attending. I want to thank you for waving. I want to thank you for your hug. I want to thank you for listening beyond what you may have been taught or beyond what you'd even care to know. That's what I'd like from St. John.
Oh, freedom. Oh, freedom over me. And before I'd be a slave, I'd be better